Okay, so I apologize for this. I keep getting dropped, so I guess I will have to edit that damn video when I put it on YouTube at some point. So, okay, we are back, I guess. Back with the students, back on the stream. I'm sorry about that, like I have no control over the internet right here, but it's probably going to be a mess. So if it disconnects again, we will just do that class at another time. Okay, but right now let's be hopeful and hope for the best, I guess. What's cool is that I did not drop the important part yet, so let's take it from there and let's start. That breaks my mood, when the internet is just like, okay, that's cool, you are in the flow, let's turn it off. So the way I personally look at composition, it is there are many rules. There is the Fibonacci spiral, there are the line of thirds, and we'll talk about the line of thirds, of course. But I realize that what drives me when I compose is contrast. Okay, simple word, contrast. I realize that anytime I talk, anytime I tell a story, anytime I want to... it's freezing again, right? It's super irritating. Yeah. So what I'm going to do, that I'm going to disconnect the team. I'm going to try to stream it. And so I will invite my students on the stream. You guys can talk to me through Discord, and this way it should hopefully reduce the amount of things that we require from the internet. All right. But this way, if I record it anyway on stream, that means that we can go back to it later. So I'm going to post the stream link on Discord. Yeah, so I really apologize for this. Like, I post all over social media that we are talking about composition today, and we end up not talking about composition at all. So, but we are going to, hopefully that will fix it. Is it better now? Like, is it more fluid on the stream right now? Okay, so I'm going to do this. I hope everyone on the Twitch stream can hear me well. And we are going to do that. We are going to talk about composition. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to do this. And if it disconnects again, then we'll just do that another day. It's not a big deal anyway. We in the chat. So composition, as I was explaining that in class earlier, composition is all about the things that you put together to tell the story you want to tell the best way you can tell it. That's the way I see That's the way I see composition. That's the way I always did. And it's more like, I feel like composition for me has always been something a bit more, dare I say, a bit instinctive. I never had to think when I was composing, up to a point where I started to educate myself with art in general. I realized that there was rules and a lot of things that people, you know, rules that people follow to guide them through composition. The line of thirds is one of them. There are many others. But I like to give my students the line of thirds as some kind of safeguard, you know, when they don't know if their composition is gonna work. Well, usually using the line of thirds will make sure that something works. So I compare composition to the foundation of a house, where you don't want to build too much over a structure that is not stable and established and working well. So composition is this: how am I going to tell my story the best way I can? What am I going to put together as a system to tell that story? And what is the language I'm going to use? What are the words I'm going to use, you know, to tell that story? So composition is kind of the pillar of narrative illustration. It's more important than, for example, sometimes, not always, but if you think about concept art and character designs, and there are many ways where composition is not everything at all, even if it still matters when you design a character. But I always think about an artwork as an instant. There is a reason why also I don't animate my work too much, or I don't 3D stuff, or I don't do comic books where there are several images of the same scene describing a moment, images after images. I was always someone who likes to tell a story into one 2D picture. That's why I'm an illustrator. And not only this, but I also, if I don't tell one story in one image, because that's kind of impossible, at least I will suggest a story, and I will suggest it enough that the people who are looking at this image will not only be made aware of some elements, and yet I will make you curious about what happened before, what happens next. You know, I like the illustration like a moment that is full of things that have been and things to come. But as I was explaining earlier, contrast is a key word for me for composition. When I started to teach, and when I had to look at the way I do things, why I do them, every time it comes back to contrast. And so it's pretty simple, you know, everything that stands out. Checking the... Oh my God. So everything that stands out out of contrast. And when you tell a story, when you build an image narratively, what you want to do is to decide what is going to stand out, what element is going to jump at the eye of the viewer. So you can put a focus point on some specific aspects and places of your image. And so to be very simple, if we have, let's say, I don't know, a film noir scene with that character who is looking by the window, smoking a cigarette with a gun on the table and looking at the city in the back, as soon as I start to describe a scene to you, you already start to have images. And so what are the focus points? What are the things that build that scene? Well, what makes it a noir moment? Like, it's the cigarette, it's the gun, it's the whiskey, I'm already like naming everything that is inappropriate to put online, you know, cigarette, alcohol, firearms. Anyway, that's all those elements are key elements to understand. But in my composition, what will I focus on? What will I use when I build that composition to make sure that we get to the character, because of the character that I want to focus on. So I will focus on the face, and I will create a lighting system that just focuses on the face of the character. And then I'm thinking, well, I could use the cigarette for it. So if he's like, smoking, the tip of the cigarette could light his face in a certain way. That could be nice. Reflection on the window, rain outside, contrast with the warmth of the cigarette. So all the mood with the rainy, grey aspect of the city in the back will contrast with that red dot on the cigarette. I would probably have the smoke going in a certain diagonal. That means that it leads to the face of the character. And in the back, there are secondary elements, like that glass of scotch and that whiskey. They are not the main elements, but they are here to confirm what I'm telling you about the character. And already, we are talking about some kind of, cliché detective at his window, smoking his cigarette, and blah, blah, blah. So in fact, a lot of compositions can be talked about. They can be thought through before you start to, even to sketch, before you start to, create images. And I'm going to show you a lot of examples in a minute. But I want you, before I show visual images, before I show images, I really want you to see that you can already build pictures. As a role-playing game designer and as a game master since my early childhood, I have done that all the time, building images. As a game master, I build images in the head of my players, and as a narrator. Right now, I'm building images in your head when I'm talking to you. And with my craft, with my artwork, I'm building images in the head of everyone who is willing to look at it. Well, the image, with illustrations, the image is given, so I guess I have to build that image for myself first. I think those ideas are interesting to reflect on and to think about before we even jump into the technicalities of composition. But in a second, I'm going to share some visuals with you, and you will see that it's all about contrast. If I create a contrast, I make you pay attention to something. In a room full of people dressed in blue, if someone shows up dressed in red, you pay attention to that person automatically. If everyone is quiet but someone is screaming, you pay attention to that person. If everyone walks in one direction and someone is walking the other way, you pay attention to it. So when you observe that in real life, the fact that contrast makes things stand out, therefore you can attract attention by generating contrast. That gives you the more useful tool you can ever use when you compose visually, because you can create contrast in your image to make sure that the people looking at it will spot that. And well, I'm going to open Photoshop and show you what I'm talking about, really. All right, so you should see my screen with some visuals right here. Hey everyone who is joining. Do you see my screen? Is everything working? Can you hear me well? Is everything going well so far? So, this is an artwork done for Magic the Gathering. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. I'm going to drop right here in front of you Where is it? All right. So this, what you see right now, is kind of the point of this entire class, and I'm going to go back to it, but I'm going to make a demonstration. And here I'm just establishing, I will post this live later. I'm already making a point, you know, contrast, cold warm, the way contrast is attracting the eyes. And I'm talking about 4 specific types of contrast: values, colors, shapes, and details. And more, like contrast of directions, brush flow, and everything. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about right now, specifically with a few pieces that we are going to look at, all these. Okay? And I'm going to show you, instead of just blablating without visuals, I'm going to make it a bit more entertaining and show you what I'm talking about. So we have, I'm going to establish that right now, we have I'm going to copy this, put it right there. All right, so let's look at values, for example. So if we look at values, we have it very clearly, very obviously, and I'm going to go with red, and no, actually, I'm going to go with white, right there. We have bright values in narrative places that matter. This entire image is about that character, the ghost, and the gold. That's it, because the story is based on that. You know, it's that one character who got a bit greedy and is harassed by ghosts because he got greedy. We don't know the entire story, but that's what's going on. And so therefore, we do have the 3 essential points of this image. This image is not about a staircase, even if the staircase here has some kind of symbols. For example, this character is also on the edge of falling, you know, like things are bad right now. So, so I'm using contrast of values as simply as this to make the character stand out, all right? He is literally bright on dark. And then I go deeper in this by I'm pushing it. So it's, you know, dark, bright, but then the face that is bright is also on a dark value right there. All right, so everything is made to contrast. Really bright on dark value, bright on dark. Dark on bright. All right, so every element in this image is built and placed in a way that you cannot miss it. Even if we zoom in, and if we start looking at the face, even these elements are placed, they are bright on a dark value. You just cannot miss that. And the face is bright on a darkened value. I'm not going to repeat that over and over, but I mean, I kind of do that on purpose. You know, I repeat, because then it stays in people's mind when I do this. So, contrast of values. We got that. Sorry, I should do things in a more. We got it. Contrast of colors. Let's look at that. I like to zoom out a bit, so even from the distance you see what I'm talking about. Well, that contrast of color is very simple. It's a mix of warm gold and blue. why did I do this? I did that because I knew that this image is a lot about gold, all right? And because of this, I wanted to find the color that will contrast the best with gold. And you can think about, I don't know, the kings of France with the golden ornaments on that king blue that they have used, which is not the blue I'm using right there, but gold and blue contrast excessively well. It's warm and cold. It's, you know. So I'm using that contrast to make sure that the warmth of the gold contrasts with some blue. So there is a contrast of color in general. I'm not going to dive into this one too much because the color system is very simple. And it's all very desaturated. So, but it's there. We have it somewhere in there. Color check. Contrast of shapes. Let's talk about shapes. Well, one of the things I like to look at when we talk about shapes in this piece is that we have a lot of round shapes everywhere. All right, round shapes all over the place. And the round shapes are, I focused those shapes on everything that is part of the narrative, the three very important elements of what I'm talking about. The character, the gold, and the ghost. Everything else is different in this. Everything else is strong, clear, geometric shapes that are all contrasting with the circle shapes I have used for the focus point. So that's a contrast of shapes. And I use that to make the important element of my narrative system, my composition, stand out. If you have any questions so far, do not hesitate. I'll be happy to answer anyone in the chat at any time. And contrast of details. Details attract the eyes as well, a lot. To show you, well, okay, all right, so details. Lots of tiny details all over the face. Because that's where I want people to focus, all those details, all the things that matter. Everything else is not as detailed. You know, that background, not much details. Any details here? Not that much. You know, it's like quick shapes and directions, but all the details are all focused on here. Contrast of details, we got it. So, I will add to this directions and brush flow. So here are some directions that show up into that image. If you look at that, even the dress itself, the robe, is leading up. Let me redo that really quick. If that's the focus one, the main focus, all those shapes are leading to it. Let me go back to red, it's more visible. Even in the brushwork right now, it's all leading to this. It's all leading to that. What is not are elements that are used for other reasons. For example, here I have visual stoppers. That means that every time your eye is trying to escape the composition or escape the main character, we have a stopper right here. If we take the stopper, let's say we escape, we hit that wall, we go back to that character, and that character is looking straight at the main character. We can hit that wall, go down, and that character is going straight back up to the character. Those are stoppers. They frame the composition around the main character. Same thing on the ground. But here there is an opening, there is no stopper here. So the character could literally fall right now. He's in danger, he's at the edge of something. You know, there is a drama aspect into that composition. And also, if he is here, it means he probably went down. So that is also a very symbolic and clear message. This character is at the end of something, like things are not going to go well. All right, do you have any questions about this? Like, is it a bit enlightening? I hope it is. And just for the sake of it, and we can talk about the line of thirds, you can find a lot of things about the line of thirds online, but pretty much just to make it very quick with line of thirds, when you divide your images in thirds, usually the intersection are where you may want to put an element that you want to focus on. The reason why it's thirds, it's because this way we avoid dividing an image in equal spaces. And by dividing it in thirds, it means that we need to kind of think about the balance of the image all over the image instead of having one part full of something and the other empty. We don't want something too binary. And so line of thirds allow you to organize informations in a more visually entertaining ways. So here we have the floor that is under this line of third, we have the character that is like really on one of those intersections. And we'll talk about the line of thirds when we go through other images. But I hope this first one is interesting. And before we move to the next ones, I'm going to create just a gray canvas and show you in a second what I'm talking about if we reactivate those contrast of values. So contrast of values, it is quite simple. We have a dark background, well, a bright background right now. If I paint something like the silhouette of a character really quick over that bright background, it contrasts, we see it well. And if I decide to paint the face of the character under the hood because this is a thief, whatever, hiding in the night, you know, then the face contrasts with the background. We could have the hands contrasting. We could have a lot of things going on. But everything, for example, there could be a moon behind the character. Oh my God! And so that moon helps making the silhouette contrast. That's contrast of values right there. You know, light over dark, over light, over dark, and so on. Contrast of colors. Well, this one is really self-explanatory. If I do this all over the place, and in the middle of that, I do this, your eyes will automatically be led to this because of this contrast. Contrast of shapes, same thing in a sea of circles. Circles of different values. If somewhere I place a triangle, automatically that contrast of shape will make people like go, wait. And same thing with details. If I'm using a brush that does not have much details and remains kind of, you know, soft edges and everything, and in the middle of this I just use a brush of the same shape with hard edge, you automatically go and focus on it because details attract the eyes as well. Okay, so let's look into those different okay, I just got called Dali in the chat. I mean, of course, right? I guess the mustache will do this. Do you use some specific ways to move the focus on the secondary elements? So yeah, so that's the thing. It's very important, I think, to to be comfortable with levels of how much you increase those contrasts. You see those ghosts on this image are not contrasting as much as the main character. Okay, because it's a bit less dark behind them and they are a bit less bright than. So the contrast, I really boost the contrast on focus 1. And my contrast system is a bit less intense where on secondary elements of focus. So when we do this, like then we can go to new pieces and look at a landscape, for example. This one I created this one for my first role-playing game, Gods. And if I just wildly look at this image, and that's what I'm going to do, first of all, you will see that to show you stuff on this image, I'm going to use blue because contrast. And I want you to see the color I use. Because if I start to show you stuff on this image using this color, it will not contrast. So you will not pay attention to it. This is, once again, like... So I'm going to use a color that contrasts with it, with a brightness that makes that you cannot miss this. I could use green, I could use whatever. So one of the first things I noticed in that image, if I was, self-analyzing, which is what I'm doing, I see directions. Big contrast of directions. I see in many places all those verticals in the bridge here as well, even foreground, I see all those verticals. I also see, I'm going to do that on different layers, I also see clearly line of thirds right here, where focus point is the city, but then we really have our ground, a mid-ground, and the sky. We travel into that image through directions. The sky, the clouds are kind of leading suddenly to the city. So the brushwork, the directions, everything is leading us to the city because that image is just all about that, going to that city. And obviously, contrast of values, where you will see on the city some bright orange that is built on a darker sky. Okay, so you cannot miss, because of colors and because of values, you cannot miss the city. Obviously, to make the point super obvious, obviously this image is not about going right there. Obviously this image is not about going right there. Because where you look at those places, it's not detailed, it's not contrasting, it's not... This is me right there telling you, do not pay attention to this. It's here, but that's not the focus, And details, of course. So with details, I attract your eyes. There are a lot of tiny details all over the place here. There are details here. So you can take the bridge and go there. Is that clear? Yes, that's a good comment, saying that that dark post is used as a stopper. It is. It is also a visual stopper. You're like, boom, you hit it, and you take that and you go back. See that diagonal right there? It is a visual stopper. It is also something for the viewer to rest against and be like, phew, what a trip, Let's move to the next one. I talked about this one in class a few times, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but this one has an interesting story. It's about that vampire that, because it's a magic card, I know it's going to be printed small. And I don't have, I can't really zoom in enough to just say, well, yeah, she's a vampire, look, she has those 2 teeth right there. So I had, because it's a small card, we can't really see it. So I had to basically put everything together to tell everyone, yeah, this is a vampire, without having to write vampire on it. And one of the things I used for that is to make sure that the dagger that she has the shape of a fang. And because she's a creature of the night, that shape has been taken right from the moon. See? Like that's the missing shape. So basically the shape that the vampire right there is interrupting into the moon, it's almost as if she grabbed it and made a fang out of it. This way I'm putting together within my composition everything I want to tell you about that character. The cape that is floating into stuff like Dracula's cape would. The hood, the dark outfit. She is a creature of the night. She is holding a fang. The city in the back is very Carpathian, Transylvanian kind of shape. That's a cliche, but I'm using it because sometimes you have to use cliche for this. And having been there, I can tell you that things are pointy there. And then what else? Bats. How do I make sure you don't miss the character and the bats? I make them all contrast with dark values over a very bright background. And then here are everything that do not matter. You don't look at, there is barely any details in there. You don't look into that. The only reason why it's here is because I wanted that character to be higher up, because she is going to fall on the next victim. And then another thing that is very present is contrast of colors. And if you look at it, all the image is kind of goldish all over the place, but I did put some blue around her and around the dagger, because those 2 points are important. The dagger and the blue to highlight her face. You see? And I also put some details in little places, just to make sure that your eyes kind of go there as well. I don't want you to completely miss on the cape going on the side, so I created tiny details. It's almost nothing, but they make you look. They give a sharpness, like those little birds, like those bats. All these are made to catch your eyes a little bit. You see that? You see them, they are here. So when people look at images, sadly, a lot of the composition is, well, what am I trying to say? That we forget to look at the complexity of some compositions, but they tell a story when they are well done. So same thing, talking about my game Gods. Here are the baddies, the cultists, number of, that cult that is just going slowly through the wildlands and putting all those villages and cities into submission. And first of all, this image is called Cultist on the Storm, because it's obviously a pun with the Doors song. But everything in there is, once again, put together with the systems I talked about. And I'm going to tackle this the same way I did show you the other ones. Let's look at values. So when we look at values, we have the brightest point of the image, which is the face of the guy looking dead on his horse. All right. Then we have the horses. I want the horses to be part of, each of those characters are attached to their horses, like kind of the Nazguls in the Lord of the Ring at first when you meet them. And so they contrast as well, because bright, dark horse, brighter background. So it's always that same system of dark over bright. Details. Once again, if you look everywhere, you see like it's almost empty of any details. The only places where I go deep into details are places where I want to talk about them a bit. So there are a lot of details here. All those details tell you they are warriors. They are not peaceful. They are cultists, but they are ready to fight. There's a fire truck going out outside. I don't know if you... So I am putting details on narrative elements that I want you to check out. I want you to see them, because they are part of what those characters are. Shapes. Obviously, there are contrast of shapes all over the place. like spikes. The characters are contrasting with everything, and directions as well. You know, they are very vertical on a landscape that is, oh my god, I don't know how much it's on fire, but it's on fire. So you see all those diagonals, it's kind of like the grand opening for them to like ride through, but they are very stable, very going forward. My god, there is like, I don't know, like 5 fire trucks like blasting through the streets, and I don't know what's up. I guess you all can hear it, but ambulances and shit, oh my god. Portsmouth, Ohio. This is not alcohol, this is water. Alright, next one. And again, I'm just really illustrating to you the way, I'm showing you how my brain works when I compose. This one is interesting because I have a student in class who is colorblind, and at the university we bought some of those glasses that shows colors for people who are colorblind. And that did bring an interesting topic in class many times, and anyway, I wanted to paint something. And so we have a character that is blind, and even in this you will see like the eyes are bright over dark value. The character is bright over darkened values as well. But obviously in that piece, what I think is very important is the fact that, yes, the character is very present. Yes, she's, you know, obviously the one main character on this image. But I really wanted the focus to be shared with this. And here we have a saturated, highly colored and detailed element that everything I'm talking about right now is present in that small, tiny little detail of the image. We do have contrast of shapes. We have contrast of directions and shapes, again. Contrast of colors, contrast of values, and contrast of details. Everything is here for you to focus on that and to see it. So obviously, when you look at the image at first, you see that character, but your eyes automatically is just dragged right there to a narrative element that is very essential. And then, once again, you have a very, very clear demonstration of, oops, what am I doing? Clear demonstration of aspect of the image where there is barely anything painted. And that's not true. It is painted in there. It's just really undetailed. Okay, all that, everything around is, there is nothing happening. It's only happening right there. Yet, it does not mean, and that's a very important aspect of it, it does not mean that it doesn't mean that I neglect other shapes and directions. I don't neglect those. Those are here for a reason. They are, once again, they are not neglected. They are here, but they are discrete, because what I want you to pay attention to is the character and the stones. Everything else is put together with the same rules, but they are more quiet. Does that make sense? So here I have these things that I did show you earlier. That is a good reminder of exactly everything I talked about. Values, colors, shapes, details. Same thing here. And you can look at it and see it in those images. So that's pretty much it for a first class about composition. I will say that the line of thirds are something that I really recommend artists and students to use when in need of guidance. When the composition is not coming together, the line of thirds are the safe zone. They are the moment where if you don't know how to make it work, when you use that, you know you will make it work. It's almost like a pentatonic scale with a guitar. You know, it could be way more complex. You could do things in a very different way, but you know that this works if you need it. It's like that car that is not fancy, doing nothing special, but it will take you where you want to go if you need it. That's how I like to talk about the line of thirds. The danger of the line of thirds and any composition methods that are a bit too stable or stabilized is that it may kind of limit your creativity, and those line of thirds may contain you just a bit too much. But again, there is a reason why. Let me stop sharing my screen. Again, there is a reason why when you pick up a camera and you look into it, you will see line of thirds. They are made for you to make a decision. When you cut things in half, if your horizon line is in the middle of an image, you are separating the image into two zones of same weight, in a way. And one of the things that is very important in composition is to know how to make choices. What does matter? What matters less? Making choices is what will allow you to build a hierarchy within your artwork. So you can, again, go straight to the point. In what I just said, I said it in a way, and I even made it contrast in my own sentence, hierarchy to the point, you know. So with line of thirds, you can't just cut it square. You can't make it equal. You have to divide in thirds, and that division that you make in between thirds pushes you to make a better repartition of elements through the artwork and decide where you place the important points. And usually you should place them where the line of thirds intersect, at the crossroads of those line of thirds, as I was showing you earlier in that demonstration. Focus one on the first intersection, and maybe you go diagonally down to the second intersection of line of thirds for a secondary element that is important. There are many, many ways to compose. There are a lot of rules that are here to help, but they should not block you. It's nice to be surprised by a composition and you know, to look at an image and be like, whoa, that speaks so well. What did the artist put together to tell me that story that I feel like I enter so easily? You could be making a lot of mistakes, and I purposely did not show bad compositions because I wanted to focus on what you should do instead of showing you what you should not do. But there are things that will definitely take your composition down if you put all the important elements all together at the same place, for example. Then what's the point of having the entire canvas? It's just lost. So unless you want to express that feeling of loss with one character, with a lot of details, a lot of contrast of values in one part of the image and everything else is empty, when you do that, it has to be done on purpose, in a way. It has to be done because you want to talk about that emptiness around the character. Phil Hale does that a lot in his paintings, and it works very, very well. But it has to be chosen. It has to be a choice that you make. The way you place things in your images matters. If you tell us a story about... I love the story of the ghost of the Canterville. At the end, that young woman decides to take the ghost and be like, hey, it's time for you to, you know, go to your grave and finally rest. And they go together to this garden. And when I was a kid, I was very shocked in a good way by this composition, this visual image that I had in that book with that little girl and that ghost walking into the graveyard. And Their silhouette, her silhouette was contrasting with the moon, and the silhouette of the ghost was contrasting because it was a shiny, bright ghost into a dark image with a grave in the background. But you have it, you know, you need three things to tell that story. You need the little girl, you need the ghost, and you need the grave. Everything else is secondary or tertiary, and you need to know that, and you need to paint that way. So in that same image, there are a lot of other things going on. There are flowers, there are other graves, there is a tree, there is a fence of the graveyard. There are so many elements that are also in the image. But they are not the thing that you remember. They are not the things that you visualize when you think about that image. You think about the grave, the little girl, and the ghost. This is what you need for the story. Everything else is here to just enhance this scene and this moment. If you paint a story of a cat who just found some fish bone for dinner and is like looking for it in the garbage container, that's it. You know, you have the fish bone, you have the cat, you have the streets. And if in that image you decide to add other cats that are interesting because one of them found a meal and they also want some of it, you will paint them but with a bit less detail than the main cat. Because they are secondary, because the story is really about that cat finding it. And the other cats are enhancing the importance of the discovery, because you paint them because they are all interested. Oh my god, a fish bone, you know. So they are important for the story, but they are secondary. And I think it's very important, that's the reason why it's very important to do the mental work of visualizing your composition before you even start drawing. I think this is why it's very important to work with thumbnails, because this way you can start to put on paper the thumbnails you create. And so you can make yourself visualize the directions that your artwork could potentially take without going to a full sketch yet, and without spending too much energy until you know where you want to go. I love this. Composition is it is what makes me excited about doing artwork. Painting and everything, yes, of course, I mean, I love this, but composition is where I have an opportunity to tell stories. I do this job, I create role-playing games, I write a lot, I do images because I have stories to tell. That's what is important to me. And depending on the story I have to tell, the story I want to tell, I will use different process. Sometimes I write about it, sometimes I make an image, sometimes I just talk about it. But no matter what, composition is the most essential thing to consider when you decide to build an image. Now, does anyone have any questions in the chat or on Discord about what I'm talking about right now? Well, that's it. You know, I'm sorry for the technical internet complications at the beginning of the stream. It's just very windy right now. We are on the edge of another storm. You can find a lot of things about composition online all over the place. Once again, I recommend Andrew Loomis. He talks about another thing that I find very interesting. It's the angles. Like one scene that is painted through different angles create different way to read that same story. So for example, if you look at the vampire piece that I just shared with you, in the composition the vampire is above us, can fall on us. We are part, she's looking at us, you know, we are part of the image, and she's threatening us in a way because she's dangerous, and I want to convey that in the artwork. But I could have painted differently. I could have get the same scene but seeing the character from above. But then if we do that, we are a danger for her because we are the one who can fall on her. If we are talking about assassins and vampires, just, you know. So the angle that you pick to paint a scene is excessively important. Yes, of course. Can you apply this type of detail, contrast, and everything on line work? Yes, of course. Like your line work can also have a sharpness. A line can be more heavy or lighter depending of where you want to attract the eyes. You know, you can play with values just with line works. I know it sounds paradoxal, but I always tell my students to, when they draw with line, where the light hits, the line work should be very light, and when you do line work where the shadows are, your lines can be heavier. There are energies in the lines, there are directions in the lines. If you work with something very colorful, same thing, you control your colors in a way that you decide where you put a contrasting element. If you are painting a very bright green scene in the forest, and in the middle of the forest there is a red bird, if you paint it red, we will definitely see the bird. So no matter your style, and for the ones of you who are in class with me, you probably know this because that's something I always talk about. I can talk about my work, but I could take the work of someone else and unfold it the same way and talk about composition and look at the way things are done, but you will see that no matter the style, it's not a matter of style, it's not a matter of how do I paint it. It's a matter, no matter what your visual identity is, no matter what, if you create a dark element on a bright element, it will contrast and it will attract the eye. The style doesn't matter here at all. That's a good question. So that's it. I will put that video on YouTube at some point when I do the effort of maybe editing and cutting the entire beginning of today's talk where everything was just cutting off. I hope this is interesting. I hope this is helpful. And I will be back next week, same time, I think we will talk about composition even a bit more. We are going to talk about directions, the way eyes tend to go into an image, and in what direction we read, and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, that's not all I got, but that's all I have for today. Thank you.